Commander Zethkar's 6 eyes dilated in horror as the quantum readings cascaded across his bio-neural interface. The impossible had become reality. Despite their desperate efforts to seal the dimensional gateway, the humans had somehow penetrated the nexus, the sacred heart of the galactic hegemony's power. How? He whispered, his translator struggling with the concept that defied all known physics. The answer came not from his subordinates, but from a voice that seemed to materialize from the very walls of their supposedly impregnable command center. Calm, almost conversational, with that peculiar human accent that had haunted the nightmares of every species in the galaxy. Because you never understood what you were dealing with. Captain Sarah Chen stepped out of what appeared to be solid metal bulkhead, her environmental suit shimmering as some kind of cloaking field deactivated. Behind her, 3 more humans emerged from impossible angles, through the floor, from the ceiling, from directions that shouldn't exist in 3-dimensional space. Zethkar's mandibles clicked in panic. Impossible! We collapsed the wormhole network, every gateway, every tunnel, every quantum bridge between your system and ours. Chen smiled, that terrifying human expression, baring teeth in what other species had learned was not always a sign of aggression, but somehow more frightening when it wasn't. You're thinking too linearly, Commander. That's always been your problem. She gestured to her team, and Zethkar watched in growing dread as they began interfacing with hegemony technology using devices that shouldn't exist. You see, when you've spent 2 centuries fighting a war across dimensions you didn't even know existed, you develop certain perspectives. Dr. Voss, Chen called to one of her team members, a wiry man whose eyes held the peculiar intensity that marked human scientists. Would you care to explain to the commander how we got here? Voss looked up from where he was somehow reprogramming their quantum consciousness transfer system. It's quite elegant, really. They closed all the macro-scale wormholes thinking in terms of ships and fleets, but they forgot about quantum entanglement mechanics. Zethkar's translator was working overtime, but the concepts were barely comprehensible. You cannot travel through quantum entanglement. The information paradox alone doesn't apply when you stop thinking of consciousness as information and start thinking of it as a quantum state, Voss interrupted cheerfully. We've been seeding entangled particles throughout their network for decades. Not enough to detect, mind you. Just a few atoms here and there slipped in with standard diplomatic pouches, trade goods, even in the waste products of our embassy ships. The full horror of what they were suggesting began to dawn on Zethkar. You transmitted yourselves? Your actual consciousnesses? The mortality rate alone? 73%, Chen said matter-of-factly. We volunteered anyway. That's another thing you never understood about humans, Commander. We don't calculate acceptable losses the same way you do. Around the command center, alarms began blaring as the humans systematically accessed systems that should have been impossible for any non-hegemony species to even perceive, let alone manipulate. But these weren't the humans the galaxy thought it knew. These were something new, something that had evolved in the crucible of an impossible war. The really beautiful part, continued Dr. Voss, his fingers dancing through holographic interfaces that rewrote reality itself, is that we've been inside your network for months. Every time you upgraded your defenses, we were already past them. Every strategic meeting, every technological advancement, every desperate plan to stop the human expansion, we were there, listening, learning, adapting. Zethkar reached for his weapon, but found his arm wouldn't obey. The 4th human, silent until now, was somehow interfacing directly with his nervous system through the same bio-neural implants that connected him to his ship. Sergeant Morrison is our specialist in biological systems, Chen explained conversationally. Turns out when you've been fighting a multi-dimensional war for 2 centuries, you learn to adapt to all sorts of alien neurology. Why? Zethkar managed to ask. Why go to such lengths? Why not simply negotiate? Chen's expression grew cold. You turned our first diplomatic envoy into a crystalline statue and displayed him in your Museum of Conquered Species. You bombarded civilian colonies because you thought humans would surrender to save non-combatants. You tried to eradicate us not just from this dimension, but from all possible dimensions. She leaned closer, and Zethkar could see something, inhuman in her very human eyes. So we evolved. We became something that could fight you on every level of reality. We became something that could survive having our consciousness scattered across quantum probability matrices and still maintain coherent thought. We became something that could slip between the atoms of your reality and emerge wherever we chose. The wormhole network was never about transportation, Commander, Dr. Voss added, having apparently finished his work. It was about access. And now that we're inside your system, every ship, every station, every planet in the hegemony is just a quantum jump away. The lights in the command center began shifting, taking on the peculiar blue-white spectrum that human technology favored. Around them, Zethkar could hear his crew crying out in confusion as their own ships began responding to human commands. You wanted to stop us by closing the wormholes, Chen said, her voice carrying the weight of inevitability. But you never considered that maybe, just maybe, humans had learned to become the thing that travels between spaces that don't exist, through dimensions you can't perceive, arriving not as invaders, but as something far worse. She smiled again, and this time Zethkar understood exactly what that expression meant. We're already home. The last thing Commander Zethkar saw before the quantum translation protocols activated was the impossible sight of human warships, materializing not around the station, but inside it, occupying the same space through some incomprehensible manipulation of dimensional physics. The wormholes were closed. The humans were stopped. But they were already everywhere.